As a geneticist, my professional interest in sex began over a decade ago, when I first started to use that science to unravel some of the secrets of the human past. I chose as the instrument to navigate these mysteries a piece of DNA which is inherited purely down the female line, passed from mother to daughter for generation upon generation, directly from our ancestors to the present day. This choice was made not out of any greater interest in women than in men on my part, but because of its special properties. What this particular stretch of DNA revealed was not so much a history of our species as a history of women. And what a history it is! I was able to show that each of us is connected by unbroken maternal threads, traceable with DNA, to one of a few ancestral women living thousands, even tens of thousands of years ago. I was also able to track the movements of our ancestors across the globe and solve some of the riddles that had puzzled scholars for centuries. Among them, the origin of the Polynesian islanders, the fate of the Neanderthals, and the nature of the first colonization of Europe by Homo sapiens before the last ice age. I was well aware that because the DNA I had used was maternally inherited, my interpretation of past events was based entirely on the genetic history of women and would need to be confirmed and complemented by an equivalent genetic history of men when that became technically feasible. However, I was confident that the main events had been interpreted correctly, and that, although they might well be revised, the conclusions I had reached would not be substantially altered when the history of men came to be known. After all, men and women had to have been in the same place at the same time. I was quite content to leave unravelling the history of men to others, and began to turn my attention to other projects. Then a chance event occurred that changed the course of my research and sent it spinning off in a new direction, and it brought the genetics of men right back into sharp focus. As so often, the sequence of events began with a phone call, a call which was in itself nothing out of the ordinary. I work in the Institute of Molecular Medicine in Oxford as a professor of genetics, and from time to time I'm asked to give talks on the subject to pharmaceutical companies. This particular call was an invitation from Glaxo Wellcome, now part of GlaxoSmithKline, to join a group of other scientists from Oxford at a conference at their company headquarters. Like many drug companies in the mid-1990s, Glaxo Wellcome had realized that the discovery of new genes by the Human Genome Project, then well underway, would identify new targets around which to design drugs. If the genes for the big killers, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and so on, could be found somewhere in our DNA, then they might show us what was going wrong when these diseases occurred, and new drugs could be designed to correct the mistakes. That, at least, was the theory. What makes this particular invitation relevant to my story is that the chairman of Glaxo Wellcome at the time was Sir Richard Sykes. As you can imagine, I was asked several times by the organisers from Glaxo Wellcome in the run-up to the meeting whether Sir Richard and I were related. The only Richard Sykes I knew at the time was my own son. As far as I knew, their chairman and I were not connected at all. You can tell from Sir Richard's accent that he was brought up in Yorkshire, in the north of England. I, on the other hand, spent my childhood in London and have the accent to match. The only similarity between Sir Richard and myself, other than our both having trained as scientists, is that we have the same surname. I thought no more about it. When I got into the car which had arrived to take me to the conference, the driver asked me the same question again. I don't know why, but this time, as I was about to repeat my simple denial, I suddenly had a thought. Maybe Sir Richard and I were related after all, but without realizing it. And, more to the point, maybe I could prove it by a genetic test. I asked the driver to wait, rushed back into the institute, grabbed one of the small brushes which I used to collect DNA samples, and ran back to the car.